highly recommend that everyone visits Forbes.com to look at this story and look how beautifully it's laid out. You can see everyone's net worth, what their assets look like, everything like that. And I am curious, after parsing through all of their fortunes, digging in and investigating for months, what are some of the trends that you saw on this list?
I think the most interesting thing I saw was the impact of whether or not someone did private practice before they went into a public service career, what the impact that that made. Because in general, the justices that did private practice, that showed up later on in their network. Chief Justice John Roberts, of course, he had a very lucrative career in private practice. So does his wife, who is a very prominent legal recruiter in Washington, and she's been the big earner after he became a judge. Um, and then same thing with Neil Gorsuch, right? Justice Gorsuch, before he became a judge, again, had a very lucrative career in private practice. Even someone like Sonia Sotomayor, who made most of her wealth after she joined the court, we see early on in her life, private practice is what gave her enough money. She was living in New York at the time, not exactly a cheap city. It gave her the money to invest in real estate that has since grown really dramatically for her, and to start building up those savings early on in life. So I think that's the biggest trend. That said, private practice is not the be-all, end-all. Samuel Alito hasn't worked in private practice since a couple months in the 70s, and he's worth $10 million. That's the second most on the court due to a combination of inheritances and some very good real estate bets that he made.
I'm curious about any differences that you saw. Obviously, there is a huge range, as you said, from 2 million to 25 million. So did how they made the bulk of their fortune differ at all?
Yeah, so I mean, the private practice thing is the biggest part of that. I think Alito is really interesting as an example. He's worked in private and in public service almost his entire career, and he was worth $2 million when he joined the court, and then his wealth has exploded in the past about 15 years, about almost 20 years now that he's been on the court, thanks to he inherited a lot of money from his mother, who died in the early 2010s, and his wife's father, who also died in the early 2010s. Um, and he became eligible for his pension. He bought a house with some of that money that he inherited, and it has tripled in value, a beach house in New Jersey. That's I think that's one of the more interesting things. The other interesting thing I'll note, I think we're going to talk a little bit about investments, but almost all the justices are mostly invested in things that try to help them avoid direct conflicts of interest. So that's things like mutual funds, index funds, bonds, that kind of thing.
That was actually my next question. Since they all are millionaires, we're talking 9 millionaires. I'm sure the viewers are curious, what exactly are they investing in?
Yeah, so it's mutual funds, index funds. Judges and justices try to avoid conflicts of interest, because if you own stock in, say, Apple, and Apple has a case in front of the Supreme Court, you have to recuse yourself from that case. It's a direct conflict of interest. That doesn't count if you own a mutual fund that is made up of 30 different stocks, and one of those stocks happens to be Apple. You don't have to recuse yourself from that case. So that makes a big difference in sort of how they can do their jobs. That said, there are two exceptions on the court. There's Chief Justice John Roberts, who owns shares in two private companies. He sold off almost all of his private holdings over the years, and so that doesn't have a big impact on him. And then, of course, there's Justice Samuel Alito. Once again, a bit of an exception here. He owns shares in 29 private companies, or 29 publicly traded companies, and that makes that he has to recuse himself somewhat frequently, or more frequently than the other justices, on account of those holdings.